Thanks very much. We're bumping up against brunch, so I think I'm down to about 7 to 10 minutes, but as an old sales guy, trust me when I say I can talk fast. So I'll get through this. Okay, so Pinsar, it's a Brisbane-based company. We've got patents in about 12 countries around the world, 23 unique innovations, and I'll run through just a few of those, but it's actually not about Pinsar today. It's more about continuous real-time DPM monitoring and the fact that, like the UGRs that came up yesterday in a fantastic presentation from Steve, in the corner of the room is a smoking piece of mobile equipment. You're all sitting here all day. Would you like to know if you're going to get up and leave, or would you like to know what the level of that DPM is in the room? And that's really the takeaway here today, is that I hope out of all this, everybody thinks just a little bit more about DPM and your mates and your colleagues that you work with. So that's my hope. So DPM, I'll get through this very quickly. We spoke about, or we heard about in a presentation this morning, the PM10, which is what you saw on that gentleman's beard. That's the silica. That's the same size there, PM10. It's 10,000 nanometers or 10 microns. Under that, 2.5 industry respirable dust, and that is displayed by the pink, as you can see, against the cross-section of your human hair. It's very small. Now, we just draw those in, the DPM, but the reality of DPM is it's 10 nanometers, not 10,000 nanometers, but 10. It can go through your eye, through your skin, and be deposited directly into your bloodstream where it can cause cancers. I'm not being alarmist, I'm just pointing out the fact that this is a very, very small and dangerous particle. So dust sits in this range here. It's caught in the nose, the throat, the trachea, and ultimately can be deposited in the lungs where it does a lot of damage. As I mentioned, DPM goes straight through all those processes and straight into your bloodstream. PM10 particle count comes out, as I said, at 10 nanometers. This is 10,000 here. The range of this particle, you can see it's coming out in high volume, but it's dropping away. And as you see that dropping away, the reason for that is because in the working environment, it cools down very quickly. And when DPM cools down, it agglomerates with water and with other carbons. And that's the mass here. The mass starts to pick up. It's agglomerating. It's still incredibly small, and it's in that range of 70 to 370 nanometers, still a lot smaller than PM10 or 10,000 as you can deduce. That's the range, or the theoretical range, of the Pinsar. Now, this is the world's currently the only continuous real-time DPM monitoring system on the planet. Others will come, so rest assured that we'll have competition at some point in the future. Again, it's not just about buying Pinsar. If everybody here does something, that would be terrific. So DPM in the 70 to 370 is where we focus our laser. So it's laser light scattering photometry, which is recognised around the world since the 1970s. Dust monitoring doesn't capture the entirety of that particle range, and it stops in that theoretical 800 nanometer range. But realistically, when you're trying to do dust and DPM, you're looking at two vastly different size particles, and it just doesn't work. So we don't bring dust into our monitor, and the dust monitors can't do DPM. That's the reality. So tailpipe testing, personal monitoring, and ambient handheld monitoring technology, they're all valid. They all have something to offer. They're part of the puzzle when it comes to dealing with diesel particulate matter. So understanding what's coming out of your engine, looking at the maintenance of that engine is important. Understanding the personal exposure to an individual is through the gravimetric monitoring system, and that's regulatory. So you're all probably aware of that. And there are handheld devices that work quite well. Again, they're spot checking, they're point-in-time validation. Obviously, what we're talking about with the Pinsar is continuous real-time monitoring, 24/7 with 105,000 samples a year per reader, 240 samples every 50 seconds. So it's a vast amount of data that you can receive. And I haven't got time to talk about it, but there's a lot we've now done with the data to help customers get value out of the product. We also recommend all of these processes get driven through a DPM committee, because if you've got the guys with the money, the guys with the vent, hygiene and maintenance of the equipment in one collaborative team, you can really make a difference for DPM in the working environment. Okay, so I better get into this. I'm running out of time. So it's a physical device, 30 kilograms. It's an ambient, long-term solution that's designed for deployment in harsh environments, long-term. It also comes with a highly configurable dashboard, etc. We can connect to hundreds of SCADA systems. We connect through VentSim, so you can look at your DPM in real time, in colour and numeric, flowing around a mining operation. So that's new through Howden. We also connect with hundreds of other different systems. There are smart lighting systems now where you can have a block light system at a tag board to enter or don't enter based on a whole bunch of contaminants, whether that be gas, whether that be heat, whether that be DPM, dust, silica, etc. So there's a lot of technology that's going to be driven through real-time technology in the future, which is good. It's going to change the industry. Pinsar's on 6 continents. We're supporting most of the biggest mining houses in the world. There's lots not there. Glencore, we've added in the last couple of weeks, and a whole bunch of others. So around the world, we're getting quite a decent name. Nothing's perfect, and I'll make that point. We're 6 years into the journey of Pinsar. We're on our 3rd version of the technology at the moment, and continuing to improve. But going back in time, 2018, this is when this first unit got deployed in a tunnel, a 57-kilometre tunnel between Lyon and Turin in Italy, Lyon in France. That tunnel is still under construction today. That particular reader, as per every single reader Pinsar has ever sold, is still in service and still operating. So it is a long-term solution, I make that point. Now, when they put this in on the 13th of December 2018, as you can see there, they didn't know their levels. In France, they don't even do gravimetrics. So this was based on a champion who just didn't want his team exposed and decided to spend the money. So they went away at Christmas 24, 25, 26. They came back, had a management meeting, and then off they went. They decided, what can we do about this? And as it turned out, when they spoke to the ventilation manager, we understand not every site has this ability. These guys had the ability to increase the ventilation, because what they discovered was Christmas time under the Mont Blanc, it's snowing outside, they'd turn the ventilation down to keep the workers a bit warmer. So in this case, they had the ability to turn it straight up, and they kept tweaking it until they got back into the green. And that's just a simple representation. It's an old case study, but it does show the power of real-time data. This is just another click we've got. You've got a different button to click on the top of the dashboard, and you can look at it in shift averages. So you can look at it ultimately in 8, 10, 12-hour shift. You can look at it as a day, potentially a week, and ultimately a year. So that's also the benefit of the dashboarding system. So going to another case study, we've had permission to put these up, and this one was shown by my colleagues. So I'm not 100% familiar with this one, so I'm just going to run through it as best I can. It was presented at a ventilation conference very recently, but it's BMA, and BMA have an OEL, as BHP does, of 30 micrograms per metre cubed as an OEL limit for their business. And Andrew Battison mentioned that this morning. And that's the case here. There is correlation between. They did a test. Go back. They did a test just looking in a environment which was more like a corridor. It's covered, but there was wind blowing through, etc., with some mobile plant, and did some correlation against the gravimetrics and the air tech. The air tech and the Pinsar didn't correlate particularly well, and that's the nature of the very small particle in that environment. We just weren't seeing the same thing at the same time. We also have different times that we sample, and we have a different technology. The air tech is now no longer for sale as well, but we had a decent correlation with the gravimetrics, which was good. And that's been proven out time and time again. Every customer that's bought the Pinsar around the world does a trial. So we're pretty used to it, and we're in lots of sites where they've continued to purchase more and more, which is good. So the first phase was the outside testing. The second phase was they were just going to passively put the Pinsar in a long wall move. So again, they were looking at exceedances of anything over 30. So this is not industry 50 as is coming up, or 100, which is more regular around the world, but it's actually up against 30. And they decided to just put the data in and just see how things transpired over the period, and look at the exceedances and the trends at the end of the process. And the conclusion was that the Pinsar responded very well, and they would then actively put it in for the next 12 months, which they did. So in this period up above, actively looking at the Pinsar on a daily basis. This is 33 days here, this one's just 18, that's that block there, just zoomed in. Now, the point of this one is not to show when we had correlation with the gravimetrics, it's to show that on many days the gravimetric tests weren't done. And in fact, we correlated 23 out of 25 exceedances with the gravimetrics. So nice to know that happened, but also the fact that on the days that the gravimetrics weren't getting done, they were still utilising the real-time data. So then they decided, okay, so this is great, but what do we actually do with it? And how do we interpret the data? What benefit are we going to get to actually reduce the exposure based on real-time data? So then they got into this scenario where they started to look at a 12-hour shift. That's 12 hours, and there's 6 exceedances in that 12-hour period. In that period of 12 hours, this particular one at the front here, you had 10 minutes over 100, 65 minutes over 30. So then they asked the question, what if we could reduce the amount of time sitting in those exceedance areas by chopping the tail off, by seeing the exceedance happen and then work with controls, which is what the Pinsar does, to eliminate the tail of those exposure periods. So that was the logic. They also had to work out within this process what actions to take, what alarms to set, because they didn't want alarms annoying them, but they didn't want alarms too late. So there was a long process that the team, obviously this is a really dedicated team, a team that's working to less than 30 micrograms per metre cubed. But they ultimately decided to chop all these tails off, and that's what they were working towards. The difference in that would have been going from 42 micrograms per metre cubed down to under the OEL, which is their internal OEL. So then they decided to move forward with that process. They also then had to determine how they want to look at the data. So this is broken up into these blocks of 1 hour in this particular view. But if that happened at 9 o'clock and then they got the alert at 10 o'clock to say they're above the OEL, they've actually not going to get that information until 10 o'clock, obviously. But what they decided to look at was a rolling average. And when they looked at the rolling average, they could get that information 50 minutes earlier. So that's what they went with, and that's actually what Pinsar counsels our customers to look at, is more rolling average. We're a long-term trending device. The Pinsar is not there to tell you you've got a 60 or a 50 or a 40 every minute of the day. It's not like a rock falling out of the sky in the mine. It's a long-term health issue. So what you want to look at is your trends over time, and that's what we advocate. So that was the phase 3. They decided to, as I said, put the target action response plans in place, and they really went to town on putting the Pinsar in. They'd purchased more, and they put them in changing zones between the ERS and the NERS based on risk assessments. Not every site's going to be able to do that. Not every regulatory body will allow that. But in this case, they did, and they're continuing to do that. And this is the difference that it made. So the results were the 21, where they passively put the Pinsars in, they had 23 exceedances. In 22, actively using real-time data, they got down to 5 exceedances, and it made a big difference to that operation, as mentioned there by the current principal hygienist. So that's the end of my presentation. I thank you very much for your time. I hope I've encouraged you to at least think about diesel particulate matter. I know everyone around the world, there's two schools of thought. One is something else to worry about, and then the other school of thought around the world is there's a champion within the business who decides enough is enough, let's do something. So I'll leave that with you. You'll have to decide that for yourselves. But thank you very much for your time. Thank you.